Thank you. Good afternoon, Madame and Monsieur, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. Welcome to the 2025 Victoria Forum. We are so delighted to see you all here again. Special welcome to all of our international participants who are here in person as well as online. And special thanks to all of you who had to navigate the vagaries of Air Canada over the last week. We certainly appreciate you being here. For the first time, we'll be translating all sessions of the Victoria Forum. While most of the presentations will be in English, at least 2 of our roundtables will be conducted in both French and English. But if you'd like a simultaneous translation into almost any language, we are using a very cool AI solution. You'll see on the screen over there, there's a QR code. If you just click on the QR code on your phone, it'll take you to a site that asks you to choose what language you'd like to hear. Over the course of the forum for the next couple of days, there'll be a different QR code in each room. So if you're going to be staying in the same room, you only have to do it once, but if you're moving, you're going to have to change. Again, I'd like to begin by acknowledging with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory we're meeting, and the Wasanich peoples, who are in working relationships with the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, all of whose historical relationships with the land continues to this day. To welcome us to the territory and ensure a good start for our deliberations, it's my pleasure to call upon Elder Butch.
Oh, thank you. I squarchel CMCA. Good day, my friends and family. Gosh, it's warm outside. Yes, thank you very much for honoring us with your presence in the Songhees Wellness Center. This center was built for the band, by the band, and has all our essential service, plus a beautiful gymnasium, a workout room up there, elder service, youth service, you name it, we have it here. So our band has been really progressive in the last 10 years, and we welcome all of those years that we can see daylight as far as services to First Nation people. I'm one of those elders to take care of. My job here today is to make people welcome. And very soon, as a teacher, I would be making students welcome and creating a welcome environment. So I hope we're doing that today with you. Because you are welcome, you're important people. That's what it's all about. I got a very large family. Actually, some people say humongous. My wife, Irene, and I have 9 children, 31 grandchildren, and very soon, 19 great-grandchildren. I sometimes wonder whether I'm boasting when I say that. But it's never a dull moment with that big a family. One of our sons works up towards Prince George, and they're on a waiting list for his wife to have a cesarean, and they'll be welcoming a little girl to our family. What a special time that is, to see our family not only get larger, but reaching far, far into the future. Chief Ron Sam, our amazing chief, couldn't be here today. Their family had a really hard week last week. They lost a young lady who was a mother of 5. And unfortunately, it just happened outside this center. So those kind of things, they just break your heart that someone so young is taken. And the same old question is, why? But you realize those things happen. I've worked in the center for 10 years as an education liaison. Prior to that, I worked with the school district for 37 years. And prior to that, I worked at the Victorian Native Friendship Center for 10 years. So I've had amazing experience in life. All those opportunities that I've had all those years, and I never planned a bit of it. So our language is called Lekwungen. Lekwungen means a place to smoke herring. And we used to have 2 herring spawns in this area when there used to be lots of fish. And people used to come here from miles around to catch and smoke herring and bring it back to their villages and bring something in return, as the old barter system said. The other part of what we look towards as our box of treasures is camas and coho salmon. So in that way, we were rich. We're a rich nation. There used to be 7 houses in this area. Each of those houses had their own governance structure and their own way of leading their nation and their own values. We look just about every day at the changes that our nation has gone through. But buildings like this help us navigate that, along with the great staff that we have here at the Wellness Center. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you made it. Take care whilst you're here. Stay hydrated. And I'll probably see you tomorrow morning, early, bright and early, at UVic, a place where I've done many, many welcomes. And I've also sang songs to congratulate students in their graduation. And boy, oh boy, did I have to sing a lot of songs. I think one year there were 600 grads, and I just barely made it through that. So thank you for having me here today, and I thank you for helping me up the stairs, and I hope you help me down the stairs. So I got a borrowed leg, and I'm happy to have this leg. Well, it makes things kind of awkward sometimes. But I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy to be here. And Osiem nu Shelicha, Osiem nu Shwalakwa, Aishkwa Kwansana Techel Lakwangan Tanuk, Aichka Sieb Nuquilia. So that's a typical welcome in Lekwungen. So I hope you feel welcome. Aishkwa.
Okay, thank you, Butch. We greatly appreciate your being here with us and sharing your words of welcome. I didn't really introduce myself. I was waiting for Butch to welcome us all to the territory. My name is Saul Klein. I'm the Executive Director of the Victoria Forum. Have the pleasure of being one of the co-founders of the Forum, which dates back to 2017. And it's great to see how the Forum has developed and expanded over the years. Our program today will start with some welcome remarks, followed by our opening panel, and then we'll have a reception afterwards right next door. To formally open the 2025 Victoria Forum, I'd like to read a message from the Prime Minister of Canada, of course, the Right Honourable Mark Carney. Please recognize his accent is a little bit different from mine, so picture him as opposed to me on the screen while I'm reading his comments. He writes, "It is with great honor that I send my warmest greetings to everyone participating in the 2025 Victoria Forum. I'd first like to recognize the Victoria Forum for the important topics it raises, the in-depth discussions it generates, and the positive change it creates. Past forums have convened different levels of government, business, academia, and civil society, and I know that this year's forum will also bring forward and accelerate powerful ideas. The theme for this year, Towards a Better Future, Shifting the Trajectory, is very much prescient for our modern global political environment. We're in a much different we're in a much different space, both geopolitically and domestically, than in 2015, when the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development established its goals and targets. It is now more than ever of the utmost importance that Canada continue to demonstrate strong leadership to create a more resilient and prosperous world. All of your voices are a key part of this process. As our government continues to make historic investments to build our economy and Canada strong, we know that sustainability, compassion, and collaboration must be at the core of this. The example Canada sets at home forms the bedrock of the global action we can inspire for transformation. A better future for Canada and the world is of critical importance to us. All of us here have a strong role to play in this, and I look forward to the ideas, consensus, and actions that we build together for it. Please accept my warmest regards and aside Mark Carney. So thank you to the Prime Minister. Following on the welcomes, I'd like to now call upon the Honourable Diana Gibson, M.L.A. for Oak Bay Gordon Head and Minister of Citizen Services, to bring greetings on behalf of the Government of British Columbia. Oh, you moved away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and for being here, to the organizers and volunteers for hosting, to the Songhees Nation, and Elder Butch for the generous welcome. Our condolences from all of us, I think, in this room to the Sam family and the entire community for your recent loss. I want to thank the Songhees Nation for their continued stewardship of the land and the water here that allows us, for many of us, to be able to work and live and gather here. And it also inspires us for the conversation to be had today around the SDGs. Elder Butch talked about his many grandchildren and the generations growing and thriving in his family. And it is an inspiration for us to think about our work with the SDGs to build in future generations to the decisions we make in policy and how we look forward in this polycrisis, which Homer Dixon here is looking at that polycrisis and many others around how we multi-solve together and continue to consider future generations. I'm excited to know that gathering here, we will have conversations around the polycrisis that will then reach the world stage, and that the discussions had in this conference will benefit generations to come. BC, like everywhere, is faced with those challenges from the polycrisis. We see, of course, in summer, the impacts of climate change and drought, atmospheric flooding in rivers and fires. We also see the challenges on the ground around delivering healthcare, housing, and we also, of course, sit in a geopolitical moment where we see the challenges of rising hate and polarization. And one of the things that makes me very excited to be in this room today is we come to this room with open minds to talk about policy and ideas and solutions, to step away from that polarization and be able here to be able to have creative problem-solving conversations. And that excites me because those spaces are becoming more rare. And BC offers some real opportunities in solving some of these crises. As one of the first jurisdictions, the first jurisdiction in Canada to implement UNDRIP, showing the leadership in putting the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act in place that led the federal government to do it and other jurisdictions to do it. That's the kind of leadership that BC can do at this moment. and continues to do with the calls for power, for clean power, so that we're building out our clean energy, leaning into the opportunities in the transition for clean innovation, clean technology, and the new economy. We have so many opportunities in BC to be strong internationally in a moment where nations like the European nations and Asia Pacific are looking for places that are strong in their environmental and sustainability and governance, those ESG values. That's SDGs, is for us to be able to continue to test and pilot and talk about the stories of success, of innovation that closes the gap on the SDGs. But we can't forget also that the price of liberty is constant vigilance. And we also need to be vigilant around the SDG gains we've made so that we don't see incursions, that we continue to mobilize the base, to support the wins we've had, to continue to fight for those things to be maintained while we work together to close the gap. And never more have I felt the importance of that conversation, sadly, at this moment, of not just coming together to talk about closing the gap on the SDGs, but also how do we continue to ensure we're able to mobilize the support to continue to maintain the gains that we've made, the hard-fought gains that many in this room have fought for. So I put those to you to discuss as challenges in the coming days. I'm excited to be at this forum. It's such a privilege to be opening it today, and I really look forward to engaging with many of you in the coming days. Also, of course, in the coming years as you bring ideas forward that our governments can pilot locally, regionally, and provincially. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. Members of the Senate of Canada have played a central role in the Victoria Forum almost from its inception, and we greatly appreciate the support. To bring us greetings from the Senate, I'd like to invite Senator Gigi Osler up to say a few words. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and bonjour à toutes et à tous. Elder Dick, thank you very much for the warm welcome. And on behalf of the Senate of Canada, I'm delighted to share a few words with you to open the 2025 Victoria Forum. To begin, I'd like to recognize the Lekwungen peoples represented by the Songhees and Esquimalt nations on whose traditional territory we are gathered today. I also acknowledge the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose deep and enduring connections to this land and water continue to this day. Le thème de cette année, vers un avenir meilleur, changer de trajectoire en 2025, nous invite à jeter un regard tourné vers le potentiel que nous avons, tout un chacun à contribuer à un avenir meilleur. En rassemblant des politiciens, le milieu académique et la société civile, le Forum offre un espace de dialogue unique qui permet des échanges entre des milieux et perspectives diversifiées. The theme for this year, Towards a Better Future, Shifting the Trajectory in 2025, invites us to look towards the potential that each of us has to contribute to a better future. By bringing together politicians, the academic community, and civil society, the Forum provides a unique space for dialogue that allows for exchanges between diverse backgrounds and perspectives. Cette année, le Forum nous permettra de réfléchir à des façons d'optimiser l'alignement de nos actions, de manière à augmenter nos chances d'atteindre les 17 objectifs de développement durable fixés par les Nations Unies. This year, the Forum will allow us to reflect on ways to optimize the alignment of our actions in order to increase our chances of achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations. Travaillant ensemble, le Parlement, le gouvernement, le secteur privé, le milieu universitaire, la société civile et la communauté des affaires, nous pouvons développer des solutions durables pour le Canada afin d'améliorer notre monde et la vie des générations futures. Working together, Parliament, government, the private sector, academia, civil society, and the business community, we can develop sustainable solutions for Canada to improve our world and the lives of future generations. Comme sénateurs, c'est un honneur de soutenir des dialogues constructifs comme ceux du Forum de Victoria. As senators, it is an honor to support constructive dialogue such as those here at the Victoria Forum. Merci et engageons-nous dans des discussions et des collaborations inspirantes au cours des 2 prochains jours. Thank you, and let's engage in inspiring discussions and collaborations over the next 2 days. Miigwech, and enjoy the forum.
Thank you very much, Senator. Really appreciate your warm words. The relationship with the Senate is really critical for us. And also thank you for stepping in at the last minute, stepping in for Senator Monsión, who couldn't be with us today. I'd now like to call on our other co-host, Chris Horbachewski, who's Vice President, External Relations at the University of Victoria. Chris?
Thank you very much, Saul. Hello and welcome everyone joining us here at the spectacular Songhees Wellness Center. And thank you to Dr. Butch Dick for the warm welcome. We're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Dick regularly share his wisdom, his time, obviously the deep, rich history and culture with UVic, and then of course for this event as well. I would also like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples of the Songhees and Quisepsum Esquimalt nations, on whose traditional territories we are gathered, and the Wasanish peoples whose relationship with the land continues to this day. I'm absolutely delighted to offer a welcome from the University of Victoria to help kick off the Victoria Forum towards a better future, shifting the trajectory. The University of Victoria is very pleased to once again be a co-host along with the Senate of Canada. The Victoria Forum provides an amazing opportunity for us to promote constructive dialogue, focus on results-oriented thinking, and most importantly, collaboration through building bridges between differing groups and among different viewpoints. At UVic, we are committed to supporting and enabling people who desire to connect across boundaries and in spite of their differences. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are so closely woven throughout all that we do at the University of Victoria. They are the values and principles that we work toward every day through CFAL Victoria and across our other institutional plans that help guide decision-making and action. One of the core priorities of our strategic plan, distinctly UVic, is entitled People, Place, and the Planet, where we acknowledge that together we are working to create a healthier and more resilient future that upholds the well-being of our region and all life on our planet. Through this priority, we are striving to advance local and global issues like climate action and sustainability, social justice and equity, and health and wellness. We embrace and are guided by the United Nations SDGs, and in many ways, these are our core values. We track our successes in helping to address the SDGs through initiatives like the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, and quite frankly, we're very proud of the work that we've accomplished. UVic ranked first in Canada and 5th globally for climate action, first in Canada and 2nd in the world for supporting sustainable cities and communities, with similar outcomes for the goal related to life below water. And so this year's theme of the conference is at once very sobering, yet ultimately optimistic. There's always a bigger picture, beyond our own successes, beyond our own influence, and we must strive for great change together. We all share in a world experiencing a seemingly unceasing number of challenges and emerging opportunities. Topics like climate change, geopolitical strife, inequality, new technologies, innovative developments, and so much more remind us of the importance of coming together as engaged and authentic partners so that we can work together to create a better future for everybody. Looking at this year's lineup of roundtable session topics, plenary conversations, and all of the SDGs that will be touched on throughout, I'm so excited to explore and learn from the expertise that we'll be gathering over the coming days. I encourage everyone here to engage in these critically important dialogues, and I challenge you to bring your out-of-the-box thinking to these timely conversations. I also want to acknowledge many great sponsors and partners that have collaborated to make this forum come to life, and I want to thank them all for their leadership and support of this important event. I also want to acknowledge the important commitment and leadership of Saul and Adele, and members of the Victoria Forum Board and the committee that has created this wonderful opportunity for all of us to come together, to learn, and to have conversation. So on behalf of the University of Victoria, thank you again for your participation in what I am certain will be a thought-provoking and very constructive series of events. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Very much appreciate that. The Victoria Forum is about changing the future. And we have come to, for some of us, a late realization that we are not the future, that we need the voices of a younger generation, the next generation and the one that will come after us. And we've tried to include a much stronger involvement of youth participation in this year's forum. To provide at least the beginning of that different perspective, I'd like to call on Tish, Sera, Josep. She's a member of the City of Victoria Youth Council to come up and give a little bit of her thoughts on what we're trying to do. Tish.
Good afternoon, esteemed guests, respected leaders, and fellow changemakers. It is an honor to speak on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lekwungen peoples here at the 2025 Victoria Forum. This forum is not only a gathering of minds. We have been brought here due to the intersection of will, wisdom, and responsibility. As a youth activist, I am able to proudly say that I'm contributing to a conversation that is not only urgent, but essential. My own path began with a simple love for speaking, through debate, youth parliament, and leadership initiatives. I found power in words, but more importantly, I discovered the beautifully fulfilling purpose in using those words to inspire action. That purpose led me onto the path of joining several youth councils and advocacy organizations across British Columbia, where I now work alongside passionate peers to raise awareness and mobilize our generation. As a marketing specialist for NGOs across the globe, I have primarily focused on harnessing the momentum of developing technologies and social media, not just to inform, but to activate, to bridge the many gaps between awareness and impact. However, despite all our energy, innovation, and ambition, my peers and I know something deeply important. This work is not ours alone. We are 5 years away from 2030, the finish line for UN Sustainable Development Goals, and yet we still have many barriers to break before crossing it. The world is warming, climate disasters are no longer distant, and solutions can no longer be postponed for another day. Refugee crises, driven by conflict, poverty, and environmental collapse, are stretching the limits of compassion and infrastructure. And women, especially in marginalized communities, still fight for autonomy over their bodies and futures. These aren't statistics, they are stories, millions of them, stories that will define the legacy that we choose to leave behind. We no longer have the luxury of gradualism. Shifting the trajectory means constant transformation. It requires deep, uncomfortable, and ambitious change. Though most importantly, it must begin now. Often, when youth like myself take the stage, we're praised for our passion, as if we are the ones holding up the world alone. However, in reality, while we do lead marches and build platforms with calls to justice, we cannot and should not be the sole carriers of this burden. This is a shared responsibility. Civic engagement is not an extracurricular. Volunteerism is not a resume booster. Now more than ever, these are lifelines. Whether you're a policymaker or simply a student trying to advocate for a meaningful cause, we each hold a piece of the solution. Shifting the trajectory isn't just about what youth can do, it's about what we all must do together. So what future do we choose? A better one is still possible, but only if we remember that hope is not passive, it is a verb. It is action in its most powerful form. To the youth in this room, keep pushing. Your voice is not invalid, it is exactly what society needs. To the adults and institutions, partner with us, not just in words, but in policy, action, funding, and in opportunity. Let us build something bold and lasting. Let's leave this forum not merely with admiration, but with action. Not with meaningless placeholders, but with strategies. And not just with ideas, but the conviction to realize them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tish. The Victoria Forum has had a very busy year, expanding our global footprint since we met this time last year. We held the first Casablanca round of the Victoria Forum earlier this year with a focus on Africa. We participated in a ceremony at Canada House in London to hand over the paddle commissioned for the Lekwungen Declaration to the Commonwealth Games Federation. And we participated in the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in New York. As another example of our increasing global reach, I'm very pleased to welcome a delegation from Colombia who are with us today. Bienvenido. Es un honor para nosotros con su presencia en el Foro de Victoria. And that's about as limits of my Spanish, I'm afraid. The delegation was organized by Social Ventures Connection and supported by Global Affairs Canada. And thanks to Adam Spence and Paula Delgadillo from SVX for making this visit happen. The international dimension is central to our approach to the Victoria Forum. The forum was created in 2017 out of the concern that the world was fragmenting and that we needed to find better solutions to the problems facing us all, where these problems are global in scope and require collaborative solutions. When we set the theme for this year's forum, at the end of last year, and it seems like an awful long time ago, we were concerned that progress that had been made in towards achieving the goals set out in the 2030 agenda was too slow, and that the targets that had been set back in 2015 were unlikely to be met. The 2025 Sustainable Development Goals report, released just last month, reinforces this concern. On one hand, the report notes that since 2015, the world has made notable strides in expanding access to education, improving maternal and child health, and bridging the digital divide. Effective prevention efforts have significantly reduced the burdens of infectious diseases such as HIV and malaria. Access to electricity has continued to grow, and renewable energy is now the fastest rising source of power worldwide. On the other hand, however, as the UN report also notes, progress has been fragile and unequal. Millions still face extreme poverty, hunger, inadequate housing, and a lack of basic services. Women, people with disabilities, and marginalized communities continue to face systemic disadvantages. Escalating conflicts, climate chaos, rising inequality, and soaring debt service costs are holding back further advancements. We also gather today with a further realization that progress in terms of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals may now have stalled, or may even be reversing in some areas. For example, a study published in The Lancet just this summer estimates that USAID programs saved more than 90 million lives over the past 2 decades. Unfortunately, the research team also estimates that if the current cuts to USAID continue until 2030, 14 million people who might otherwise have lived could die. We're seeing a fundamental shift in global cooperation, and the very validity of the SDGs is being denigrated as being part of a so-called globalist ideological agenda. It's a sad reflection of our times that a globalist ideological agenda is positive as a negative thing, as opposed to a positive one. This situation is both a cause and a consequence of the changing geopolitical context in which we find ourselves. We're experiencing fundamental threats to the liberal world order that characterized much of the post-World War II era, where internationalism, free trade, democracy, and multilateral institutions were seen as driving aspirations. This liberal order emphasized cooperation, collective security, and the rule of law to maintain peace and prosperity. It is today under threat from rising nationalism, authoritarianism, and institutionalized corruption. A fundamental question has arisen as to what will replace the liberal world order. The rule of law appears in many instances to have been subsumed by a rule of whim and the exercise of coercive power. Writing in the Atlantic magazine, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Anne Applebaum cautions that the new reality may be a world characterized by anarchy and greed. She uses the conflict in Sudan as a warning sign, but could just as easily have looked at the tragedies unfolding in Ukraine, Gaza, or any number of other regions where one atrocity follows another. In her book, Autocracy, Inc., The Dictators Who Want to Run the World, Applebaum asserts that there is no liberal world order anymore, but that there are liberal societies which offer good opportunities for people to live meaningful lives. These societies can be saved, she argues, but only if those of us who live in them are willing to make the effort to save them. It is this challenge that underlies this year's Victoria Forum. As Artie Freeman and I mentioned in an op-ed recently, while the notion of empathy is being questioned, it is actually at the core of our humanity and is our best hope for sustaining a better world. We need to build and rely on our moral compasses to guide us. At the Victoria Forum, we convene gatherings to develop solutions to the world's most pressing problems. We come from a place of hope, a belief that problems have solutions, and a view that it is the status quo that is neither desirable nor sustainable. For making all of this possible, I'd also like to thank our sponsors. First, our co-hosts, the Senate of Canada and the University of Victoria. I'm proud to acknowledge that 15 current senators are joining us for this year's forum. And at my count, around 1/3 of all members of the Senate have engaged with us in some way over the years. Second, I'd like to thank our founding sponsors, TELUS and the Gustafson School of Business, for having the foresight and the sense of broader purpose to support this type of initiative. Third, I would like to thank our other major supporters, Power Corporation, Coast Capital Savings, the Definity Foundation, the Victoria Foundation, Van City, the Vancouver Foundation, Just Be Capital, ASET, Advancing Community Energy Transformation, the City of Victoria, Calgary on Purpose, and the Echo Foundation. Without their generous support, the Victoria Forum could not happen. We are immensely grateful to you all. I would also like to thank the long and growing list of organizational partners for seeing the value of working together with us in the search for solutions. I'm not going to read the list. It is getting way too long to read, but their names are all available on the website, and it's a wonderful sense of honor and gratitude that we have for that involvement with us. And finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Adele Gituni and Stephen Haddett, for doing much of the work in putting this program together. Zoe Wells and her team for making everything happen based on the crazy ideas that Adele, Stephen, and I would come up with. And all of our volunteers who work behind the scenes, coordinated so well by Vinny Awasti. Thank to all of those people. And now for a change of pace, we have a very different type of presenter coming on board to re-inject some energy for those of you who feel a little bit sleepish after my extended remarks. I'd like to call up Zia the Free, a local hip-hop artist. She was a great success at TEDx Victoria recently And we're very happy to have her here for a repeat engagement. Zoe?
Hello. So change in energy is right. I didn't get the dress code. Hip hop's a little more wild. So thanks for making space for me to be here. I'm a traveler in this land. I grew up in Treaty 7 by the Rocky Mountains, and so it's such an honor to get to be by the ocean and feel the openness of the air. And so I'm a hip hop artist, and I also work a lot with youth. I'm a youth mentor. I work a lot on reserves with inner city youth and also in youth detention centers. And so my focus is community building and deepening human relationships through young people finding the power of their voice and connecting in vulnerable ways. And so one of the main gatherings that we do in hip hop is called a cypher. Has anyone here heard of a cypher before? Oh, really? Do you rap? We're going to freestyle later? So a cypher always takes place in a circle. And when we gather in a circle, we are equal. And so everyone is entering the space in an equal way. We're equally vulnerable. And essentially, we pass the energy. People have a chance to showcase. They have a chance to play. They have a chance to explore and learn. And in these spaces, I've found, building on my honors research, which I did in my bachelor's degree, that there is a lot of belonging that is fostered. And when we feel belonging, especially as young people, it has a direct impact on our engagement in other aspects of society. So when we feel belonging, we are more likely to vote in our local, provincial, federal elections. So there's direct connections in that way. And when we feel belonging, we also feel empowered. And when you feel empowered, you're more likely to take action. To anything, to any cause that you find meaningful, to bringing your friends into something. And so this is why I feel that hip hop is a very potent, very important piece. And I love that there's youth aspect at the forum today. So we're gonna have fun. We're gonna do 3 tracks. We're gonna get you moving a little bit. This first one is called Moonfunk, and sometimes as artists, we process the world through our art. And rap actually stands for rhythm and poetry, for those of you that don't know. So when you hear the rhythm and I'm spitting the poetry, feel free to let your bodies move a little bit, you know. We'll get into it more and more as it builds. So this is DJ Brian. I've named him that. Before he was Tech Brian, but today he's a DJ, so give it up for him. You can play that first track. Hey. All right, y'all, we alive? We feeling good? Can we get a little woo? Let's go. Come on, come on. Who I am and what I'll be. It's the freedom in my system that keeps moving me. When I was young, didn't know clothes came from a store. I thought they came from a garbage bag and neighbors next door. Now I'm writing these bars and you buying this gold. All up in the center like I was a centerfold. I'm a strong, bad woman with a hell of a flow. I'll be her anchor down and be left in the dirt. But hip-hop went and helped me find my own self-worth. Rising as a queen, rock a crown when I step. Real ones with me, trust and love what I rep. Feeding to the culture cause it helped me to grow. Remember each one, teach one, and then it's ensured. Taught me all the differences and how to belong. Gave me a sense of higher meaning and learn right from wrong. We losing out so many truths, stifling voices ending youth. They think they could be something, send a message that they nothing. How you supposed to overcome? All you ever seen is pain and misdirection, and the anger weighs more than a ton. You do it too, ain't no better than. We all just products of our environment. The question is, will the gardens grow or will we keep on starving? Who needs the help? Ay, ay. Will we plant the seeds and help the gardens grow? Or keep starving? Who needs the help? Will we plant the seeds and help the gardens grow? Or keep starving? Who needs the help? Will we plant the seeds and help the gardens grow? Or keep starving? Who needs the help? Will we plant the seeds? Will we plant the seeds? My only answers ever came through the bass and the drums. Helped me to find the healing when my heart was broken and numb. Reflecting back on my time on this earth, the realest ones alive when I was drowning in hurt. Had to get myself sober, had to make myself clean. Face up in the mirror, all the things that I've been wasting on, losing my light to others in it. The vortex of victimhood can really be I see it now, the tricks of the trade. They wanna see you broken if they can't face their pain. Wanna make it your fault, hope that you don't stand tall. Well, we here to tell them that we taking it all. Can anybody hear me? Am I just talking to myself? Empty lip service, people dying just for help. How you gonna blame them when they ain't got no home? How you gonna pretend you don't see Gaza getting bombed? How you turn away from women when you came from one? How you never loved the earth when she showed you the sun? How you don't get off their backs if they say they can't breathe? Struggle with cops, we've lost too many. Can anybody hear me? Am I just talking to myself? People dying just for help. Can anybody hear me? Am I just talking to myself? Dying just for help. Can anybody hear me? Are we doing something about it? When they dying just for help. I said, can anybody hear me? Hey. Let the bass drop, music is love. Rock with the rhythm, all the homies pull up, see us reppin', it's fashion. Every time a sweet part of the culture and I state of mind. Rise through if you hurtin', alone in the night. Gotta keep on going when you don't wanna fight. Can't let the negative win, gotta keep on giving. Prove to yourself that your life be worth living. Culture taught me put your best self first. Generosity will help you see what you deserve. My family showed me put your true self forth. Life will carry you through to discover your worth. The world showed me keep your spirit intact. That nothing can touch you from fear, from lack. My pain proved to me I can survive. It might sting when I remember, glad I'm alive. I'm always searching for the meaning and the depth in this life. I think there's always more to something causing me strife. I know synchronicity is magic and truth, yet the human condition keep me searching for proof. I wanna make a move, I'm afraid what they think. I got confidence for sure, but in the work challenging, I'm still worried about others. If I'm a nothing, pretend you don't care, but deep down you bluffing. If all we have is one life, there's space to be. I know community and beats, you're my energy. If all we have is one life, take time to feel. Move with intent, trust you can heal. If all we have is one life, take time to breathe. Help others connect to their integrity. If all we have is one life, this chance to see. Live in the now, set yourself free. Sometimes the weight of everything and darkness can feel like it will consume. So I wonder if you could answer any question, what would you ask? I would want to know why suffering that we inflict upon ourselves and other living things, when our existence, our voice is our strength, our presence, our possibility to change everything, simply by remembering the light within us. The light within me honors the light within you. The light within me honors the light within you. The light within me honors the light within you. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to have fun. So in moving and inviting artistic and loud and vocal spaces to connect with academia and politicians and leaders, it's such an important place because hip hop was actually started by young people. It was started by 12, 13-year-olds in the Bronx in New York, and they were writing about their lived experiences and their struggles and their realities. And it's become this huge cultural movement. It just turned 53 years old. Maybe some of you can relate. And it's been an amazing shift in the world, and it's a really potent way for young people to talk and be vulnerable and speak about things that they've come through. So when we're shifting trajectories, I think that it's important to start with our own trajectory, right? And our own anchoring in ourself and our relationships with the land and with others. And so this track is called Reason for Change, and I wrote it just one of those days that you have a hard time in the inner city, and just thinking about the stories that we all bring to where we are. And as all of you as change makers, you've probably had one of those moments where it can feel heavy and hard. And so I'm gonna get you to help me with this. When I say, hey, what do you say? You're all gonna say, we got a reason for change. So let's practice. Hey, what do you say? Oh, you're ready. We don't even need a warm up. Okay, great. And I want you to think about what your reason is when we're doing this, right? It can be one. I think we should always encourage. Someone might want to be invested in the environment. Someone might want to be invested in policy changing. Someone might want to be invested in on the ground doing things day to day. It's all valuable. So let's get it, DJ Brian. Grew up in a place where nobody cared, no time to be gentle, he always felt scared. Abuse all around him with no space to breathe, seeing the outcome of what we can be. She grew up in a home nobody saw, not feeling beautiful, tears always falling, cause nobody told her she worthy. And nobody told her she bright. So now she be sleeping like so far from home. The streets are the coldest, the middle of night. Tell me like what are we doing and why we confusing? The reason we here is give strength to the movement. I feel like we losing, humanity doomed. I believe in light, have to keep moving. We throwing hands, cruelty consuming. I'll fight for the right things, I know what we're doing. We gotta fight for the right things, we know what we're doing. We gotta fight for the right things. Hey, what do you say? Telling the world we making waves, and you know we never gonna obey. Like, hey, what do you say? Louder. That's right. Hey, what do you say? Hey, what do you say? We got a reason for change. Telling the world we making waves, and you know we never gonna obey. Like, hey, what do you say? Come on. Hey, what do you say? Woman in her low can't stand on her feet. She all in the pile, there's nothing to eat. Man stepping down, said, miss why you burned out. Look back at him empty, surprised by concern. I was feeling bloodshot from lack of real sleep. Life a concern if you live on the streets. She feeding hard, she pile on scars. Faded by memories, lost in her heart. He said, I'll call someone, let me get you help. Everyone walking past while she in hell. You scared, he asked. She's saying yes. You help me breathe, I can't handle this pressure. How we get this empty in our humanity? None of us separate, we all are we. We all are we. I said none of us separate, we all are we. We all are we. It's interconnection, it's all we can be. We all are we. It's interconnection, it's all we can be. Hey, what do you say? Come on! Hey, telling the world we making waves, and we never gonna obey. Like, hey, what do you say? And now whisper, hey, what do you say? Cause we got a reason for change. Cause we got a reason for change. We got a reason for change. We got a reason for change. Think about yours. This man at the bus stop, he's screaming and yelling. His face all in agony, body be telling. He mazed straight to his face. No reason they gave him but being misplaced. What are we doing? We're hurting another. All for a backpack that's empty of substance. People starting to trip. You come undone when you high all the time, then your spirit gets numb. Time is something that we must understand. Mama taught me stop if someone needs help. If you turn in your back, you be in the worst. Cops on the street, they don't care if we hurt. Don't become what you fear, don't look away. Somebody cries, that's your reason to stay. Their essence and energy bleeds if you bleed. Pretend you can't see them, you're lost to the greed. Don't be lost to the greed. Pretend you can't see them, you're lost to the greed. Don't be lost to the greed. Don't be lost to the greed. So, hey, what do you say? Change real loud. Hey, what do you say? Change. Good job, Victoria Forum. Okay, I feel you, I feel you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks, DJ Brad. So I love that this forum is very much about action. I think that's very, very potent because when I'm working a lot with young people, there's always action. It's always a very key piece is now that you've uncovered these things or you're processing these things, because in hip hop, we say something where it's each one, teach one. And so it's that idea that it's always going to keep moving and that energy is always moving forward. So I hope you get to spend some times in circle and some times with vulnerability over this weekend and maybe get a little creative. And I'm going to start you off with this finale. I love freestyle, that's why I'm called Z the Free. And if you've never heard of freestyle rap before, it's when you rap just in the moment. So it's totally unplanned, unpracticed, and it's a very, very good process of being in the now. And it's actually tapping into something called the flow state, which has been scientifically proven to be good for our health. When we enter a flow state, which we can do through athletics or through creativity, anything where everything else just kind of falls away and you're very, very present, it allows you to release positive endorphins. It kind of gives you this natural high. It actually regulates your central nervous system. And so freestyling is good for your health. And we're going to tap into that. But I need from some of you, brave volunteers, some words that I can put into the freestyle. So it can be anything. It can be anything at all. Okay, you're in it, purple shirt. Welcome. Okay, great word. Yep, welcome's one word. Yep, coming over here. Social justice. These are my people. That's why I was so happy to come. All right, yeah, over here. Empathy. What great words. Oh my gosh. Yesterday I was at a music festival in Waskesiu and it was like pickle. So this is great. I'm very happy with this. This is great. Okay, so welcome, empathy, social justice. Joy. Oh, you look like that. That should be your name. Okay, empathy, welcome, social justice, joy. We'll get one more in the front. Trust. Oh, this is an excellent song. All right, let's give it up one more time for DJ Brian. He's going to play the final beat. Empathy, joy, trust, and social justice. All right, let's rock it. You can crank the beat up a little bit. Let's get a clap going, okay? Hey, that's good. That's good. Here we are together in Victoria. We at the forum. You know we never boring cause we having fun. We feeling like so much joy. Smiles on your faces. You know that that's real. Everybody in it cause the energy is passion. We gonna make a difference and you know it's everlasting. Social justice, it's a long way to go. We learning and we elevating on this long road. We all be in it so you know that we gon' rise. If we interconnected then you know that be the vibe. We feeling empathy all in our bodies. It helps us remember why we hear about it. So you know we gonna get you into it. When I say the word, say it back real fluid. When I say hip, y'all say hop. Hip, hip. When I say feel it, y'all say love. Feel it, feel it. That's what's up. Okay, that's what's up. Okay. Yeah, I love the way that you put in the words. Yeah, they be the best that I ever think I heard. Now we having fun with it right up on the spot. Purple be the color of your beautiful top. And that's what we have to be when we come in the vibe. Feeling all the essence and we getting it right. Cause if you have empathy, then I do too. I see myself in that reflection of you. Building it together and be vulnerable. And you know that it leads us to be joyful. Cause that's the best essence in how you gonna live. Vibrations moving in the best way to give. So find your purpose, social justice. If we're gonna change it up, let's make a ruckus. We can't be quiet, we gotta get loud. So Victoria Forum, let me hear you get it now. When I say Victoria, you say Forum. Victoria, Victoria. And when I say it's us, you say to change. It's us to make. It's us to make. It's us to make. It's us to make the change. Thank you so much. I'm Zitha Free. I will be. Thanks, Brad. I'm really grateful I get to attend for 2 days and my mom's here. And so please come up and say hello. I have stickers and business cards. And if you're interested in engaging with youth, or the energy and ways that we can do that in community building and deepening relationships, I've got a lot of research on belonging to back me up. So we can have a great conversation. So thank you so much for having me. Zitha Free.
Thank you, Gigi. That was amazing. The difficulty, however, is the panel has now got a very difficult task. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to convert their entire presentations to rap. But we have a great panel. The opening plenary really does set the stage for the rest of the Victoria Forum. And to introduce the panel and moderate the discussion, please welcome Carol Ann Hilton. Carol Ann, you want to come up? Carol Ann is the founder of the Indigenomics Institute and author of The Rise of Indigenous Economic Power. Carol Ann, thank you for joining us again. And we'll turn this over to you and test your rap skills.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. That is such a strong demonstration of our voice and how that translates into action. Let's give it up again. That was amazing. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Our opening plenary today, Shifting Trajectory to a Better Future. To be able to bring into focus this discussion today, as the world approaches 2030, the urgent need to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals intersects powerfully with rising geopolitical uncertainty. This plenary session explores how the SDGs serve as a compass in today's uncertain world, and at how the work of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada serves as a model for values-based transformative change. I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists here today. We'll begin and invite the Right Honourable Joe Clark to the stage.
Where would you have these set to the far end?
My friend and colleague, Miles Richardson. I'm not sure if they gave you a mic, but I've never known Miles to need a mic. And finally, Noorjahan Mawani. We would like to welcome you to the stage, and we'll have each of you do an introduction shortly. I'd like to thank our esteemed elder for the warm welcome and acknowledgement to this territory, and for the Lekwungen people for holding the space of ceremony and the realities of responsibilities of this land and this place. For the Victoria Forum for bringing together a powerful focus, a laser that brings into our awareness how we relate to the concept towards a better future, shifting the trajectory. As we understand 5 years are left within the final stretch for SDG achievement, this is it. This is the moment, and this is the response. As we look to here in Canada, and we begin to understand and bring into our perspective and ask the question, what can Canada's reconciliation journey, with all of its complexities and incomplete progress, teach us today about making transformative change? It is in this moment of reflection that we feel that tension of our expectations of our response in a global context and our ability to respond within a national context. To realize the shared foundation of reconciliation and the SDGs brings into focus justice, equity, well-being. And at the foundation, this is about repairing our relationships. Relationships to ourselves, relationships to the earth, relationships to all of those beings, and to relationship to our future. It is in this concept that understanding the rising geopolitical uncertainty, that we be careful with our words and we be careful with our ability to describe how we're showing up in this moment of this leadership in building a response of what we call our reason for coming together today. It's in this urgency that we must act decisively and begin to understand what that means to shift the trajectory. Positioning the SDGs beyond this experience or concept of targets. That we must think critically about this concept of a moral compass that's presented in front of us for global cooperation. And it's in these uncertain times, the values embedded in the SDGs, from human dignity, sustainability, equity, and peace, matter more than ever. The challenge as we look at this concept of the moral compass, how do we hold this within a time of turbulence? And as we move to the introductions of our panelists, to realize that in this moment, that this is the first generation right here, with the full awareness of the requirement of climate adaptation. That this is the first generation with the tools such as AI to begin to understand the recognition of technology in this moment. And this is also the first generation to witness and experience in all of its fullness the tipping point that is in front of us as humanity. With that framing of this plenary session, and with the honor and respect of our colleagues, our friend, and our fellow speakers here, I would like to begin and invite Miles Richardson, my friend, my colleague, Executive Director of the National Consortium for Indigenous Economic Development, to do an introduction of yourself, your leadership, and witnessing this moment of the Victoria Forum as we begin to have the discussion of shifting the trajectory to a better future. Miles?
Hawa. Thank you, Caroline. I am Kilslai Kaji. I am Miles Richardson. I am a citizen of the Haida Nation, and I'm really honored to be here in Lekwungen speaking people's territory, in the place of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and really thank Elder Butch Dick for welcoming us so graciously and generously at a tough time in their community. I grew up in Haida Gwaii. My family is from Haida Gwaii. I never even left home there, and I had to leave in grade 11 because we didn't have grade 11 and 12 in those days. I went to high school in Prince Rupert. I lived with my dad, my grandmother there, and then came to University of Victoria after that. And I earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics in 1979. And after that, I went home, and I guess my people decided that I'd learned something in coming to university, and I ended up reluctantly being elected president of our nation. We were just then organizing as a Haida nation with our own Haida government, and I was for 15 years after university the elected leader of that. So during that time, that's really what was my education in this lifetime, and it was those years. And after that, I saw an opportunity that we'd stood up in defense of our homeland, and while we were able to protect and stop the destruction of our homeland, I saw in the government of the day that was Prime Minister Mulroney with Attorney General Joe Clark, I saw an opportunity that I figured they had their mind wrapped around of what Haida title meant. And I think if I thought that we would have been so close to being able to do something. And so we protected Guayhanas, which was the beginning of protecting all of our homelands, which is the fact today. And we began building a treaty process in British Columbia, which didn't, the next governments weren't so committed to the principles we laid out there. So 30-something years later, we're finally getting there. I think we're getting closer, driven by the courts every step of the way, kicking us and pushing us forward. But my time, that's been building that treaty process, pushing and urging people to come up with ideas, come up with solutions, put them in strategic ways, and commit to following through. And that's really been my career. And Caroline, when I came to UVic and we set up the national, and continued with the National Consortium for Indigenous Economic Development, I remember Chief Andy Thomas of Esquimalt, of one of the Lekwungen First Nations, who was a big supporter of NCIED working with Indigenous peoples across this country to build our own economies. Andy Thomas was really clear from day one. He said, you remember this as you go across this country, helping our people build our own economies. All we want to be, he said, is who we are. Thank you.
It's one of our teachings is that when we bring the name forward of a late leader, that they're here with us. So big respect to the late Chief Andy Thomas from Esquimalt Nation here in Lekwungen Territory. Thank you, Miles. Next, I would like to move over to the Right Honourable Minister Joe Clark, 16th Prime Minister of Canada, global statesman, formidable expertise in democracy, human rights, and international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Miles. I learned it all on High River, all of those things. I learned something new. You got elected in 1979. You graduated in 1979, okay. And then you got elected right after that. I got elected in 1979, I got thrown right out. What did you know that I didn't know? I think one of the things that
You agreed with me, that's why.
I'm surprised at how many times I agreed with you. But it's an interesting question because, like a lot of people who are not Indigenous, I knew the history from afar, but it didn't occur to me that I agreed with you and so many Indigenous people as much as I did. I was raised on the edge of the Rocky Mountains with reserves around me. We had little to do with one another at that time in those schools. There was not hostility, there was distance. And I think going with distance, there was a sense that these people living out towards the mountain, they don't really matter as much as we do. And as you grow up in life and you encountered the realities of Indigenous life and Indigenous contribution, you understand how, two things you understand. Indigenous people have been here a lot longer than the rest of us. This is, in that sense, the sense of time of occupancy. This is, in a sense, their land more than it is our land. We're here together now, and one of the real challenges we have faced for some long time is how we recognize the harms that have been done, the good that has been done, and how we build one from the other. You and I worked together principally in the processes of the Charlottetown Accord. And that was a quite remarkable process when I look back at it. And it's a lesson for today, because in the government of that time, we looked around at things that were wrong and at conventional ways to deal with them. And we recognized that some of the conventional ways would not work. And we thought that on the difficult question of Indigenous relations, we had to find some way in which the authorities that had power, the federal and the provincial and territorial governments, could sit down as equals with Indigenous people for whom we had presumed to speak in the past, and to let them speak for themselves around the table. And I have to say that I can't recall a time when I have met with a more effective, at the end of the day, highly cooperative group of people as I did with the Indigenous leaders of your time and mine. We didn't always agree, but we found a basis for agreement that led to quite significant changes at that time. That's a process that is continuing. And both on the question of Indigenous relations and on the question of what kind of progress we're likely to make in the world that's taking shape now, I want to pick up a phrase that is in the documents we received that talked about the importance of moral compass, because we assume that if we invoke a phrase of obligation and a moral compass, that will make it happen. I think we assume that moral compass is something relatively easy to achieve. It isn't. And I believe, and I'm picking up on a point Saul made earlier, that not only is it difficult to achieve, it is becoming more difficult to achieve than it was. We should not assume that morality alone will achieve the changes we want to achieve. Actions have to achieve those changes. And it's not just the collective actions that governments take, it's the individual actions that individual people take as they move forward. Those are the ways that we can move forward. And to go back to the time together when you and I first met, we didn't just talk about that, we actually did. We actually identified some ways in which that kind of change can be made. I'll stop for the moment, thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Next, it is my honor to introduce Noorjahan Mawani, former diplomatic representative of Kyrgyzstan and Afghanistan, former vice chair of the IDRC, leader in international development and diplomacy with lived experience navigating fragile states and advancing equity through institutional frameworks. Noorjahan?
Thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be here. You've asked us to introduce ourselves, so I thought I would start by taking us all, you all, to a small town, now a big city, called Mombasa in Kenya, which is where I was born and grew up, spent most of my youth there until I left to go for a higher education. Now, one of probably the most defining times in my life came when I was a student at the Aga Khan School in Mombasa. Now, at that time, we were under colonial rule, and the schools were very restricted. They were all separate. It was separate development. It wasn't called apartheid, but it was separate development. And in our school, we didn't have anyone who was not South Asian. The Europeans had their own schools, on buses, on everything, and but the Africans were not allowed to be in our schools. They had sort of public schools where the quality of education was very much to be desired. And what happened then is that the board of the Aga Khan School, and I will never forget that, decided that they were going to challenge the provincial authorities and that they would open up our school to everyone, including Africans. What that meant was that the school was threatened that they would lose the stipend, which was coming with every student. And it was a question of who would blink first. And I'm really glad to tell you that our school board didn't. And that was hugely important for me, and I think for many of my schoolmates, that it was possible to stand up against injustice. It was possible to stand up against discrimination, and that when you took a stand, there may be a price to pay, but that sometimes you have to pay that price, and that speaking out but taking action is critical at that time. And so, I mean, I think for me it was a defining moment, and from then on I decided that yes, it's possible. And then I think the next phase of that quickly was that there was a decision to make what I would do when I finished my high school. And it was a question of whether I would, in my mind, in my head, was about whether I'd be a teacher or whether I'd go into law. Law, because I could see the power of the law being able to challenge and to transform and change. Teaching, because you could influence minds. It was really important. And at the end of the day, I did choose law. And not because I thought that law was more exalted than teaching, but because I was wanting to follow my childhood sweetheart, who is here today, who was going to the UK. And had I chosen teaching, I could have stayed in Kenya and gone to school there. But law was not available, access to legal academic education. And so there we are, and now, 55 years later.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that powerful reflection. As we speak about reconciliation in Canada as a model, it's important to understand that this is not simply about addressing the past. It's about values-based transformation. It's about rebuilding systems, economies, and governance structures. It's deeply practical, and it's deeply important to be able to understand where we are within this, because it changes how we make decisions, how resources are managed, and how opportunities are shared. The lessons from Reconciliation Canada resonate far beyond our borders, and they show us that values can stabilize relationships across divides. Reconciliation, in this sense, offers a model for reflection. It reminds us that durable transformation requires more than policies and technical targets. It requires values strong enough to anchor systems in times of uncertainty. And that is why reconciliation matters, not only here in Canada, but as an example for a world searching for stability, equity, and sustainability and stability, In being able to understand what these questions are, I move to Miles with the question: Indigenous nations are demonstrating sustainable governance rooted in culture and intergenerational responsibility. How can these models inform how we pursue the SDGs, particularly around climate action, partnerships, and reducing inequality?
Caroline, I want to take a look back so that maybe we can answer some of those questions looking forward. I am from an ancient people, an ancient nation, the Haida Nation. As are you, Caroline, your new channel. We got Chief Ava Hill from the Mohawk people. We've got the living generation of many of the ancient nations who've made up Canada, what's now Canada, for millennia. That my people have been analyzed by scientists through C14 dating as having been in Haida Gwaii 15,000 years ago. We know we've been there since our creation on this earth. My particular people came out of the ocean where we still live today. And I want to ask each of you to think about something in answering this question. I'm sitting before you, as each of us are, as the living generation of these ancient peoples, these ancient nations. That we can say that, is that a coincidence? Or did our people know something about sustainability, about resilience, about keeping on? I insist on the latter, that our cultures showed us the answer to those questions. And what we need to do today is to have enough strength, to have enough humility, have enough empathy, or whatever you want to call it, to listen to that history, to listen to everything around us today, and figure out the answer to those questions. The second point I want to make is that it's my opinion. I think that humankind right now is in an existential crisis, it's often referred to. We don't even know if we're going to survive as a species. I think the Earth will be just fine without us. but we don't know if we're going to survive. Why has this come about? You know, it's really this uncertainty has happened in the last like 500 years with this whole industrial approach. And we've got to figure out, in figuring out the way forward, we got to have a look at what happened here. But I think the power over our places that we live has shifted from human societies in places they call home having the power to control who they are. Because that's what my elders said to me. Don't worry about Canada and BC. That's not why we've been here all of our existence. Worry about Haida Gwaii, our life source. That's our life source. Look after Haida Gwaii if you want to survive. That became our political mandate. That was 30 years ago. Well, maybe a little more, maybe 40. Today, that power over who we were fighting was the nation states and their creature corporations that have taken power off in pursuit of economic development and all these harebrained ideas that we got to get some control over. We got to bring power back to home. Bring power back to the places that we care about. And you look at what's happening in British Columbia today. You know, I was kind of lamenting about the 30 lost years of treaty negotiations, but we've learned a lot during that time about our relationships to each other as peoples and our commitment that we're all here to stay. We're committed to that in Canada. Let's just accept that and get on with it. Quit trying to snuff each other out, because that's what we're still doing. And all the answers are there, is what I'm saying, Caroline. And I'd love to go on and on about, you know, British Columbia should be rejoicing. I see Andrew Petter in here. He was minister in a previous provincial government that did land use planning in British Columbia for 15 years. They tried to do it, just British Columbians, non-Indigenous people on one side of a thick political line, and Indigenous people did it on the other side in a treaty process. Finally, we brought those together in British Columbia on the North Coast and did land use planning on a government-to-government basis. Man, people thought the sky was going to fall. People in the forest companies and stuff. And what happened? Our economy got freed up. Our, economic activity started happening again. We cut a lot less in the forests. We protected a lot of other things we thought we weren't going to protect, medicines and plants and fish, but we made a big step forward. Imagine if we did that. I mean, we've already shown it can happen. We don't even talk about it, but to me, that's one of the most things in my career I'm most proud of participating in. We can do that in every sector. All I'm saying is there's answers there. I'd love to speak for 3 more hours and tell you more of them, but we got 2 days.
I want to follow on one of those. Yeah, applause. That requires applause. I don't doubt at all that focusing on Indigenous tradition has strengthened Indigenous communities who applied those traditions. The question that occurs to me, and it should have occurred to me a long time ago, to what degree has the larger Canada sought to apply Indigenous lessons, which began before the rest of us were here, to the larger country of Canada? I don't think, in a sense, we have ever done that. I think what we have done is tried to understand what was going on in local communities and try to encourage it when we can, or too often ignoring it. But let's stay with the positive. But have we ever looked, people in the audience may know, have we ever looked at lessons that might lead to fundamental change that the whole of Canada could gain from the Indigenous experience. That sounds like sort of an impossible concept, take too long to look at, but I don't think it would take too long to look at. And I think, among other things, it would revise the standing of Indigenous people in the whole of the country. Because instead of simply being respect for a past, this could be a kind of architecture for the future that depends upon things that had worked in the past and might still be viable. I don't know if this has been pursued at any time before, or if it can be.
We're both making the case that we ought to pursue it.
Yeah.
We ought to give it a shot. I mean, it's gonna. You look at the court cases today, the Aboriginal title court cases. That's where they're all pushing. They've been, they do it in the guise of go to the negotiating table. All they're saying is talk to each other, share your experiences. It's a smart suggestion, but we're just too stubborn. You look at Haida Gwaii and the title recognition agreements that both BC and Canada have done within the past year. They've finally recognized Haida Gwaii, Haida own it all. So does every other tribe in their own territory. That's an inevitable conclusion. But you know what? What's going on there, Joe, is the non-Haidas organized in 4 municipalities are at the table with us. They're on the Haida side. They're saying we entrust our future to our neighbors. And when they're defining their title in negotiations with our government, we're going to be there supporting them. What's wrong with that? Finding a solution that we're supporting our neighbors instead of fighting with each other. I don't know, we're not there yet. I shouldn't be too sunny and optimistic about it, but it's a great idea.
Thank you, Miles. I'm not sure we've known sunny and optimistic in your language, but your voice is powerful to reflect the state of the Indigenous relationship. I'd like to move over to Nurjahan in terms of drawing from your experience. Where have you seen values-based approaches succeed, and what can that teach us as we approach 2030?
Thank you. First of all, I did want to say that this is centering this forum, Victoria Forum, on the SDGs is really important. And the reason I say this is because I'm not sure that many Canadians, I would not say most, but I would say many Canadians are actually aware that we have made a commitment. We as Canada have made a commitment to the SDGs. And I think this forum and the conversations that are happening here, and they will hopefully cascade, we will reinforce the importance of our commitment to the SDGs. So I do want to compliment and commend the organizers for picking this theme. Now, you've asked me to speak about my some experiences in a fragile and uncertain context. It's true, and there are many examples, but I want to tell you that when people say to me, oh, Nurjahan, you were so brave. You've been in Afghanistan for 7 years through all this turbulence, and in Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia through revolutions and ethnic conflicts, and how much, we're in admiration. And what I say is that it's what I got from this, what I learned from this was the most important thing. The incredible, incredible resilience that we've talked about, the incredible community partnerships, the incredible concern for each other, and the readiness to work together. Those were, and the question of trust, and I want to go back to that, they're really important. So when we think of fragility and we think of our own fragility, and I think COVID brought that home to us a lot. Now in the current economic situation, geopolitical situation, a sense of feeling hopeless and overwhelmed and and a sense of fragility. But I will never forget that the sense of what it means to have fear and what fragility means is when my colleagues working with me, when you left the office in Kabul, we always said to each other, stay safe, stay safe. And that term, was that you may not reach home. My colleagues would say to me, when we leave in the morning, we are not sure we will be able to see our families again. So that is the sort of learning the fragility that, and how it allowed me and showed me what I had to learn, and the resilience that the communities that I found in people, just incredibly remarkable. And I'm drawing on some of the things that you've talked about already. Now, in terms of the drawing from this experience, one very important lesson that I learned was that we need to make a long-term commitment. Now, I know a long-term commitment to our long-term commitment to development and to our I would leave that there, to say that we are not fair weather friends. When the going gets tough, we leave. And that's what I think people remember. That is what totally destroys trust. And so trust requires making longer-term commitments. I know that in a way, this is an antithetical, because one might say, well, the SDGs do have a time frame, and we do need a time frame, but we also need goals that will allow us to be able to still continue with that goal, but we may need to be prepared to set back a little bit, because that will happen and has happened. So when there are situations where there is a conflict, for example, or where there is a major climate crisis, that we will find that we will need to moderate maybe our expectations, but to still keep the eye on the long term. And during the way, what I learned in terms of a values-based approach, which I think we are talking about, is perhaps I can give you a small example. And I'm sensitive to the time, so I'll keep this. There are many very prominent examples, but I'll give you a small example which has always stayed with me. This is from, in the context of early childhood development, again, an SDG, and in a country, small country in Central Asia called Kyrgyzstan. Now, what would happen there is that during the summer, the communities would not, in the mountain areas, would not send their children to school. Why? Because they needed to move their cattle and their sheep to the higher mountain pastures so that they could be there for the winter. And so that they could gather whatever was needed for the winter. So school stopped, children wouldn't go there. Teachers weren't going to get a salary, and they needed to go to the mountains also because of their herds. So one wonderful Kyrgyz teacher who was part of our network said, why don't we take the kindergartens to the pastures? And really pretty obvious solution, but frankly, nobody had thought of it. But what did that need? What that needed was, it needed the communities to come together. So everyone had an interest in this. Nobody wanted their children to miss school. And they knew how important early childhood education was. So in so doing, the whole school, the community moved to the pastures, and I was there in those mountain areas to see what was happening. And the community would look after the herds of the teachers. So that, because the teachers were not getting a salary, so they would look after the herds of the teachers continued, and the children had their education. And it was a simple, creative solution. And ultimately, guess what? It got a BBC award. Now, you know, so I mean, this is a way in which it reached out to the most remote, marginalized communities, and it was not one. From then on, it went to scale. And the entire country adopted this, a very, very mountainous country. So I'm going to leave that with you as a thought of how when technical support and when communities come together over shared values, you can go very far and actually quite quickly, and you can go to scale. And so it was a very special experience for me.
I want to make the point that both my colleagues here have talked not about things that should be done, but of things that have actually been done. And it's interesting because we're better at talk than we are at action. And yet, I want now to jump ahead to a time when I was the foreign minister of the country. And we knew that there were limitations upon what Canada could do, but there were also capacities that we had in persuading other people. And on at least two major initiatives, we tried to do things. One of them had to do with the apartheid regime in South Africa. And I don't want to claim too much credit for Canada because the real actors in South Africa were the South Africans, but they needed help, all sorts of help. And we recognized that we could offer that help. And it was not easy around the Commonwealth table, in part because of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the time, who was clearly not interested in that issue. And what was quite interesting was that we had gathered a group of foreign ministers. I was foreign minister at that time, foreign ministers of various African countries. And without plotting against anybody, we decided that we could come to a consensus among the non-British around the table to move forward on a Commonwealth initiative. And we did. And it was a quite significant initiative in the longer term. At the end of the day, the people who drove the change were South Africans, but they needed to have that kind of help from us. And we realized that why just talk about this? Why not actually try to do something about this? And again, in the Charlottetown process, which didn't work out for various reasons, or didn't work out directly for various reasons, we recognized that there was a major problem here that was rooted in part, in fact, that people who were potential problem solvers had not been drawn together. And I remember that you and your Indigenous colleagues were more than a little suspicious about what might happen in the Charlottetown conference, where you were there as equal participants, except that you couldn't vote. And the rest of us, because we were actual governments, had the power to vote. Well, I think the actual conversations wore down that skepticism, and we reached a point where there was really genuine agreement. So what comes of this, the point I'm trying to make is, we're all good at talking. The real challenge is to take a look at what we're talking about and see if there are ways in which we can shape that into an action, into a specific initiative that will change. And this is not just a job for government. You're demonstrating it. I mean, you're doing it in your own domains quite effectively, probably more effectively and more consistently than the nation is. Why can't the nation learn from that kind of situation? I think that kind of attitude, if we could embed it back into the House of Commons, would have a quite dramatic change upon the attitudes that elected officials of all parties take to their role. They feel that they're sort of ciphers now. They're not taking initiatives, and there are initiatives to take that can draw on your examples and really change the country.
This is excellent, thank you. Let's finish with the question for Miles. In what ways does the reconciliation process with Indigenous peoples in Canada offer a blueprint for values-based transformative change?
Well, my mind's still on Joe's point about how Charlottetown didn't pass in the vote, but it deepened the conversation in this country at a time it needed to be, and I think is a precursor to a lot of the progress that we're seeing today, some of which is in the courts, but people have kind of become more supportive of the commitment that we're all here to stay. And Canada could really play, just like you're saying, through those foreign leaders of various governments, foreign affairs leaders of various governments. Canada could play a big role in bringing these values-based, transformative change to other countries. But to answer that direct question, is Canadians have to do, the potential, the opportunity is for Canadians to do what Chief Andy Thomas asked you, is to compel you, is to just accept us for who we are. That includes our title. That includes a commitment, and I hope I heard that about your part of the world, because sometimes I listen to confirm what's in my head, but I'm hoping I'm hearing the same thing, that if you recognize, if Canada or other countries recognize Indigenous people for who we are as we see ourselves, you're recognizing a people who are committed to a place, a people who are committed to respecting that place, living in balance in that place, and also having a principle, a value of reciprocity. You look after me, Haida Gwaii, that's my homeland, everybody has their own. I'll do my best as a human to look after you and respect your balance. That's what I think Indigenous relations with Canada could offer to this international systems change, trajectory to transformative change. Just imagine if, I recently went to a gathering of the NAFTA group, it used to be NAFTA, Canada, US, and Mexico, in the convention center just a couple of years ago. And they were talking about supporting these three countries, a Guardians network. Indigenous people have pushed Canada, and Canada has put unprecedented support, financial support, behind an Indigenous Guardians network to meet these SDC objectives of 30% terrestrial and marine conservation by 2030. Beautiful idea. Mexico was taking the chair. They were going to ride this horse. Canada put it out there. I could just see that happening in every area. Anyway, the tools are there, and if we had that commitment, but we got to listen, we got to identify the fundamentals of what in these Indigenous nations, what in these Indigenous ways, not only of thinking, ways of being, which entail relationships, relationship to place, relationship to people. What is it in there that we can employ, that we can use just as humans? Because it didn't work because we're Haidas, it worked because we're humans and we dealt with it as humans. Anyway, you get the point.
Well, one PS, if I can add a PS to that, one of the real advantages for Canada is that we would have authority on some of those issues that will increase in the context of the current attitudes of the USA. Because the USA, for a long time, through simple power, has been the definer of a lot of Western initiatives. And they're not going to do this. Nothing we see in the attitudes of the present US administration suggests that they would have any sympathy at all for this sort of thing. But a lot of other countries in the world would, countries that have Indigenous populations where there are troubles comparable to some of our own, and where they would like, and where what is needed is the building of respect in the broader community in each place. It's interesting to think about the Trump regime as creating an opportunity for more reasonable nations. No, but it's true, and it could very well happen.
Wonderful, thank you. That's the time that we have for today as we move towards the reception, but realizing that in 2024, the Yellowhead Institute called for the end of reporting on the progress of the Canadian government for the development of the calls to action. And I think for the absence of progress, there's much to learn in this moment around the lessons and this reflective time to examine what are the lessons from Indigenous economic, social, and cultural resilience and how that can be integrated into the broader global sustainability strategies. Thank you for each one of our colleagues today for your powerful lived experience and your leadership in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you.
Any questions? We have a question here from my new friend, Catherine, that I just met earlier. There's a mic being brought to the room, the center, and then we have one question over here.
I'm Catherine Odora Hoppers.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear.
I was the advisor to the parliament in South Africa in 1997.
Wow.
And yeah, 3 years after independence, where South Africa realized that the whole system was driven by apartheid knowledge systems, actually. They couldn't help it. How was the African knowledge systems to be brought in the open, in public, without any duress? Imagine, it was a national question. And as advisor to the parliament, we took it up. And I drove that initiative, workshopping the heads of parliament, the scientific councils in South Africa, workshopping the vice chancellors, working with the communities, until the parliament got a writ from the presidents of the science councils, an admission, yes, we admit that the paradigm of the knowledge we had been busy propagating for decades and centuries were Western. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you so much to all three of you. That was amazing to hear you three speak. I loved every one of your message. Miles Richardson, you've been one of my heroes for a long time. It was amazing to hear you speak. My name is Farah Shroff, and I have a question for all of you. I'd love to hear from each of the three of you, because you're harking back to these days, the 1979 days, which were so different than 2025. And so I would love to hear what you have to say to today's leaders, Indigenous leaders. Like, if I just think about the time when you were leading your party, Joe Clark, and the leader that your party has now, that has just miles different. So I would love to hear what you would say to Monsieur Poilievre about how to lead his party. And I would love to hear from you, Miles Richardson, about what are the next steps for Indigenous sovereignty and power in this country called Canada. And from you, who was born in the same country as me, Kenya, it was so beautiful to hear your stories. Just a message for the world, because we live in a moment where the world, like we've all been talking about, is falling apart. The paradigm we've known is falling apart. So love to hear from the three of you. Just a message for today.
Some very large questions.
Well, let me start with parties. because there was a time not long ago when national political parties in Canada were quite innovative and quite representative. And they were, you can't pretend that they were ever really bottom up, but they were much more bottom up than top down now. And they are now very top down. Part of that is a media phenomenon. I was a pretty active parliamentarian in government and in opposition, and I was not always polite to the people across the floor, but neither was I abusive. And the purpose of debate then, if you disagreed with something, was to change it, to get it amended, to get it improved. Now it's a slanging match. And I'm afraid that is happening. That's almost inherent to the party system as it's developed. I agree with you that it is worse in one party than in others, and I won't go beyond that question at the moment. But it is a systemic fault in Canada that we have to begin to develop, to address, because so long as it persists, it's going to feed antagonisms among people who, at the end of the day, are there to try to find consensus in a complicated country. And it's a major fault in our system. I understand that I'm now 86, and when I say that, I'm sounding like some old guy nostalgic about the time. But I have seen these things evolve over time. I know what is inevitable and what isn't inevitable, and I think that one of our major political problems in this country is to restore some kind of balance and respect to the national parties.
So your question to me is when I was a young leader coming out of school in 1979 in the early 80s, I had faced that reality. What would I tell young leaders coming on the scene today? I tell them the same thing Chief Andy Thomas said to us. Be who you are. That takes vision, that takes listening to your elders, that takes courage. You know, in 1979, that nobody believed us, nobody listened to us, and here our elders were telling us that in the way they put that, and that you could translate into strategic terms, is trust our culture. That was their simple message. So we had to listen, and things we did had to gain the test of support of our own people. So it wasn't just a bunch of few leaders sitting around the table. If it didn't truth test through discussion and approval by our people, mainly, anyway, it's a long story. Haidas are still ruled by matriarchs. And things had to go through those tests, and it was a tougher road, but you know what? It got us. Today, we're where we need to be, that our destiny is in our own hands. And that's what Canada and BC's agreement and commitment to putting that through. So that's what I'd say the same thing, and I think it's a different world today, and it's a hell of a lot more possible. But you know, the speaker before you talked about South Africa when the people democratically took back power, but they were still living in a system, a paradigm that was designed to, what I referred to earlier, snuff them out. You got to change that. That's the systemic change Adam Kahane talks about. That's the systemic change, the transformative change that we got to put our minds to. It's a different, and all the SDG 17 goals that are in there are consistent. I mean, that's what Indigenous culture tells us to do. You know, look after the air, water, and soil. Look after the elements of life. It's not a cult. It's a way of understanding truth in this world. Trust your culture. Work with people who are committed to understanding and accepting the truth. That's a flawless guide That's what I tell young leaders today.
Yeah.
And everything you need to do that is it's sitting right in front of you.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you for the powerful response. Would you like to add anything?
You had a specific question for me, I think. For the yeah. Well, I'm going to build on what you've just said, which is, I think, the real importance of listening. I feel that if I can make one big pitch, is listen and listen deeply. Because we are no longer listening, we're listening at a very superficial level, almost what we want to hear, sometimes what we think we've heard, but mostly it's what we want to hear. So that deep listening, because often that challenges us too. And we need to be ready to be challenged on that. So I think that deep listening, and then listening to truths too. Because that's another whole area. And then the whole question around whose truths. So then that starts a conversation. And so a conversation which is done in a respectful way. So one would say that. And the second, quickly, I would add is, let's acknowledge the pivotal role of civil society. I think we pay, again, rather lip service. We rate it, we'll say governments, private sector, and civil society. But what are we really saying? What does that mean about civil society? I'm going to suggest we all unpack that. And we remember that communities are the heartbeat of civil society. And we have been talking a lot about civil society, about communities. And so again, trust communities. And again, in the current environment, civil society, the way it is mobilizing today, it's incredible around the world today. So I would put a lot at stake there. And my final point is, remember, fear is infectious, but so is hope.
And just one thing I wanted to add, and I know you meant it. There's only one truth. There's not my truth and your truth. There's only one truth, and we're just human beings. Our cultures are about striving to understand what that is, and we never really know if we've got it right. But sustainable, figuring things out over long expanses of time is a pretty good indicator.
And be prepared to do that.
Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Vinod, and I'm with Future of Good. Really appreciated all of your reflections and perspectives and insights. And I have a question for each of you, and it builds on, Miles, something that you left me with. You eloquently asked, do we have the humility to listen to our history? A lot of us here who are working toward a better future are generally welcoming and open to listening to all kinds of people. Young people, Black folks, brown folks, queer folks, Indigenous folks, all kinds of people, except one. And that's people who don't believe in the same things we believe in. We are living in an era where we, as people working toward a better future, often end up alienating or vilifying people who don't share our beliefs. How can we develop the humility to listen to people we don't agree with?
Yeah.
I have a quick answer that's not full. Run for office. No, I'm not. No, I mean, I represented for quite a few years the constituency of Rocky Mountain, Alberta, later called Yellowhead. A huge constituency that went from the U.S. border up nearly to the north. I had the illusion earlier that I could have run in a Calgary seat, which I probably could have done. But I thought it would be more interesting to run in one that was much more various. And what I learned is that people in these rural communities were much franker than they were in the cities. They wouldn't let you get away with much. They had some views that scared the hell out of me in some cases, a few cases, but you learned a lot from them and you learned to listen. And it was a real learning. I tried all my life. I was raised to try to be respectful of other people, but I really learned that lesson when I knew that if I was going to earn the vote of somebody who had views I thought were kind of odd on some things, I had to show enough respect for them that they would vote for me in the hope that if we came to some kind of discussion, they might prevail or I might prevail. That's one, and that's, so the real point here is, one way or another, we all depend upon people with whom we disagree. We may depend more upon people with whom we agree, but we all depend upon the view of others. And if you're in a situation where you have to show that respect, you learn from it. You learn more because they become a little more reasonable than if they think you're meeting you across a sense of contest. I think the question of sort of groups being isolated in this world is really difficult, and I think we settle into these kinds of, so some equivalent of having to go out and running for office, getting involved in your community, seeing if the values that you think you represent have any reflection at all with others. I think that is a learning experience. It can be for everybody. You sometimes get knocked in the teeth, too.
You want to take answer? Go ahead. Okay, I'd address how do you engage with someone who holds a different point of view than I do, is your question? I'd answer that around respect. I mean, I grew up in my home, in my family, with a constant understanding that the only respect worth having is the respect you earn, and that began with respect for yourself. And that meant not being a bully, showing concern for others and listening to them. That was real. That's what we were taught, even as kids. When I became president of the Haida Nation, we were underdogs. Nobody listened to us. We took very firm, direct action that hurt people politically. Like, we stopped logging, we stopped mining, we cut off livelihoods. And I'll tell you, I had an ego, and I didn't mind making it a little more painful for a little longer because of what they put us through. Our elders I didn't even expect this, were mindful of this. And basically every time came to our council and says, no, 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 you quit that. Those are our neighbors today. When this is over, they're still gonna be our neighbors and we value them. That was a lesson in that regard. Then I go fast forward away from the Haida Nation, I'm in the Treaty Commission. I'm Chief Commissioner of the BC Treaty Commission. And in downtown Vancouver on the media, we're hashing it out with loud ranchers and people who don't think like me. Sometimes we refer them as rednecks. Then I'd get up into their communities and the TV cameras are off and we go into a back room. And I loved those situations. And, we could really get to the point of what we're disagreeing about. I never left one of those rooms without a handshake. When two human beings could just talk about what we ended up finding out we agreed about a lot more than we disagreed about, and find a way of working it out. We didn't always work it out, but we always left with a sufficient degree of respect each other to keep that dialogue going? I think it's an important question. I didn't answer your question. I just gave you a perspective.
I don't think I have much more to add. I think this was so powerful, and it goes back to the to respect. And I mean, but I will say something which is a little bit perhaps different, which is that I have found that as much as I've tried, or believe I've tried my best, and then it's been a question of also building some alliances, but I found that at the end of the day, I just wasn't going to be able to shift that or have that conversation, and that it was taking so much emotional toll that I had to decide that I think I'm going to leave that for now. Maybe I will come back to it. So my advice to you is that don't allow it to get to you to such a point that it almost immobilizes you. And then, but go back to it when you are feeling stronger and build around more allyship. And then I think you will be able to deal with these much more effectively.
Thank you.
This is the last question.
Sorry, pal. Okay, mine's a really short one, so you'll kind of come up with me here. It'll be very short. So my name is Coral Stramberg, and I'm with the Canadian Purpose Economy Project. And I emphasize the word purpose in our title because I want to ask you a question about purpose. And where I'm headed with this, and maybe just one of you who wants to kind of jump in on this so there's time for his question, but where I'm heading to on this is as we're talking about aligning on values, I'm thinking, how do you set up that table, your values of respect and trust and reciprocity? And in my mind, I keep replacing the word values with purpose. And for 30 years, I've been working in the field of values alignment and working together on shared values and things like that. And I think it's now time to go beyond values to purpose, not to leave our values behind, but to surface the purpose of the individual, the purpose of the project, the social good of the project, the social good of the company, the social good of the government. Have we all defined our purpose? And do we know why we exist at all these levels? And if we did, would that unlock more opportunities for collaboration? I'll leave you to ponder and answer, and then Tyler will ask his questions, and we'll get through the last little bit. Thank you.
Okay.
He's coming as well.
Should I? Okay.
I just should say, he's demonstrated the value of purpose.
So my name's Tyler, and I have a relatively quick question. Once upon a time, I was having a conversation with a friend from Hong Kong who was telling me that in Hong Kong, only Indigenous people can own land, and everybody else is on sort of more of a leasehold agreement. And Miles, you suggested that Indigenous folk should trust their culture, and that non-Indigenous folk should trust Indigenous folk to trust their culture to help us forward. And so I wondered, why in Canada can't we do a thing where land, we acknowledge Indigenous title, and that there is a vibrant democracy upon land where Indigenous people hold title and own the land, and non-Indigenous people have leaseholds or something of that sort. And I wonder why that can't happen, or, in Canada.
Those are two totally unrelated questions.
I'd just say it's going to happen. Do you care? Do you care if your landlord's the Crown or the First Nation in whose territory you are? What difference does it make to you? As long as you know what the rules are.
Yes.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I'm not saying where it's going to happen. That's up to each of the people in their area, but I know it's going to happen. Look at Vancouver. Look at that case that just happened a week and a half ago.
Referring to the Cowichan fee simple case. Would anyone else like to respond as we close the comments here?
Well, I'm not sure I understand all the implications of the question, but don't engage on an impossible task, I guess is what I would say. You think it's going to happen in any event, and maybe it is. I would imagine you have better things to do with your life than trying to make that happen, but that's just my cynical view.
Well, I out of respect to the previous questioner, you talked about aligning the values with purpose. And I would say just one thing is that find a way of arriving at a shared purpose. And that takes time, that'll take a lot of conversations, and you'll find ultimately that it is possible. Everybody's purpose initially might be different, but then if you look at the end goal, what is the ultimate goal that you are, or outcome? And then how can you get to that as a shared purpose? And I think that may be the way to go.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good.
So that's the time that we have today. Thank you so much for the wisdom of the words and the leadership demonstrated here. And there's lots to think about that as a framing narrative as we go forward into the forum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caroline.
Thank you.
We need to thank you too.
Well, thank you all. Remember, one of the hallmarks of a great session is when people want more. So apologies to those of you who didn't have a chance to answer your questions, but remember this is the beginning of the forum and our speakers are all going to be here for the forum. It's one of the characteristics of the Victoria Forum, and the speakers will stay and engage. We do have one other speaker for today who has been listening quietly, but is going to provide some reflections from his perspective on what we just heard and the issues we're facing. And that's Chief Wilton Littlechild. He's joining us online through his work with the TRC, as well as on the development of UNDRIP. Among many other things, he's had a massive impact on our lives and what's happening here as well as abroad. Those of you who are here in 2022, when we finalized the Lekwungen Declaration on the Power of Sport to Advance Reconciliation with Indigenous Peoples, will remember his powerful words and his personal journey as a residential school survivor. Willie, over to you to share a few reflections. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all. Let me introduce myself. Maikan moten sigason maskotsi sigotse. Egoaste ogamawi hon gi migaone usauge heu gi sigat gaon. Ego kakiks no maksian. To asumtana unyanosab gi sigason. Üks kakio nas komt na kete amina gikset ka gis most magoyak naskamo. I just introduced myself in my language, Cree language, to say that my Cree name is Walking Wolf, and also I was blessed in ceremony with a chief's name, which is in English Golden Eagle. And I also introduced myself with my residential school name, which was EIRS number 65. So that covers the whole gamut of my names. And I want to, again, seriously thank the panel members who are ahead of me in terms of setting us up very well on the stage for this particular Victoria Forum from their lived experiences. I too want to share that, as you just introduced me, from two lenses. One, as former commissioner for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, which we've mentioned, you've mentioned in your commentary. Also, from the lens of a person who was in the negotiating room for the Sustainable Development Goals. So if I can link those two lenses together from what we've heard from the panel members, I'll try my best. In the introduction to the panel, the word reconciliation was defined, but I'm going to stop right after the word reconciliation and set the stage to the topic of switching the trajectory going forward. And we heard reconciliation was about a journey towards justice and equity. So how do we move then in that stage setting from exclusion to inclusion? And that's really my major point I wanted to address with you this afternoon. How do we, in this geopolitical uncertainty, as was described also, how do we advance reconciliation in that scenario? So I want to try my best in terms of the two recent experiences to grapple with that very difficult question and discussion. We come from an experience of being left out, being excluded. We were not even on a trajectory at that point. And I say that because when the UN Millennium Development Goals were established at the United Nations, Indigenous peoples were totally excluded in that discussion at the UN to come to a conclude on Millennium Development Goals. From that experience, we fought really hard to be included in the Sustainable Development Goals. And it was really difficult, I have to say, because many times, and this is kind of unusual at the UN, to go into late evening sessions, which we did. I remember sessions going till 2 o'clock in the morning because of the difficulty and the resistance, really, by states to include us as Indigenous peoples in the Sustainable Development Goals. But the good news is, as you all know now, there are 6 references to Indigenous peoples in the Sustainable Development Goals. So that was a difficult journey, I'll say, at the UN itself. And I remember a big theme being couched as no one left behind. No one is to be left behind. And I remember actually the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, when he was stepping down, we were reflecting on those nights and discussions. And he said to me, Willie, don't let them leave you behind. But then after a series of experiences trying to work with the Sustainable Development Goals, many of us started to conclude, yes, no one should be left behind, but we were being pushed behind in the discussions on the Sustainable Development Goals. When there's an evaluation of a state member like Canada, they receive a report card. We're nowhere in the picture. So then let me jump then to the discussion with the panel members. And I want to agree with a lot of what was said, especially by Miles, because Miles, he reminded me during our Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings when trauma was being discussed and former students, survivors were sometimes talking through pain and anger and tears about what they thought reconciliation should be or must be for them. And I remember a old man asked us, you want to heal? He said, go to the bush, and in the bush find a tree and put offering in 4 directions, and then talk to the tree. Talk to the tree if you want to heal. But most importantly, he said, if you really want to heal, listen to the tree. And that was really sage advice, I thought, through the Truth Commission, when we tried to find out ways not only to heal, but to be included. And as you said, all we want to be is who we are. And that's truly been reflected since the TRC of Canada was concluded. And we're still on that journey. And let me also reflect on former colleague, Right Honourable Joe Clark, during the discussions of the Charlottetown Accord. If you remember, Right Honourable Prime Minister, I want to respect your office. We had a scenario illustrated to us that the support in Canada for Indigenous people's issues was like a pendulum. It would swing one way, we would get support, then we would swing back the other way, and it'd be less or no support. But during the Charlottetown Accord, if you remember when we concluded, we were informed that the level of support in Canada for the Indigenous people's issues during the Charlottetown Accord and at the concluding stages was 76% of Canadians supported what the Charlottetown Accord was concluding. The difficulty was when the vote was taken, we were mixed with the argument of Quebec seeking distinct society status. And that's, of course, where the focus went. And then we lost the support from Canada on that 76%. I just wanted to reflect on that. And I remember also you saying that we're here again together. And if I may remind you, I don't want to do this as a friend. I'll say, Joe, if you remember in one of your really important national audience statements from your own experience, was you went to some elders and you were seeking advice on how we can build a better country. And you went to the advice of elders. And if I remember right, it was about we all have to work together. We all have to lift each other up, I think is what the elders told you from my recollection. So in this geopolitical uncertainty that we're currently in now, and a new era of seeking ways to advance reconciliation in this geopolitical uncertainty, that's a real challenge. But I want to go to a solution, because after 6.5 years of work on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I want to highlight 3 calls to action, which I think are appropriate for this discussion at this forum. For example, call number 43 calls on all governments to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as not only a platform, but the basis for reconciliation. And then the following call to action, number 44, calls on national governments, the federal government, to establish a national action plan to implement the UN Declaration. So there, of course, we're unique in the world as we have legislation in Canada, the Implementation Act for the UN Declaration. So I think therein lies a big solution to the challenging question we have about moving to a better future on this trajectory that we're on right now. And if I may call also to, there's only one call to action for private industry. There's calls to governments, there's calls to Indigenous peoples, and there's a call to private industry. And that too calls on private industry to implement the UN Declaration, all their policies and ways of doing business, to implement and utilize the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. When we concluded our journey on TRC, we asked each other, what was the key message? What were the 10 actually key messages? over these 6 years of listening. And we concluded that the very first principle of reconciliation was to use the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Later on, at the UN in Geneva, those 10 principles from Canada were then globalized and presented to the Human Rights Council. There are now 10 principles of reconciliation globally. So when we moved from a very difficult situation of residential school era to finding out the truth and what should reconciliation look like from that truth, the world was watching us, actually. I remember being told, I think there were over 200 countries at one point following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. 68 countries consistently were following us. So now that we have this global adoption of the TRC principles from Canada, let's see how that's playing out. Well, recently there was a G7 summit in Alberta in Kananaskis. All the leaders of G7 were there. But were we included in those discussions? I ask that because all 7 of them have endorsed and supported the UN Declaration. But again, we were excluded from those discussions. So, but I'm not just going to present complaints from that perspective, because I think the common challenge we have is the theme of these discussions. And if we want to switch the trajectory and look into the future, the one key we concluded as TRC commissioners, the one line conclusion, I'll say, which we thought was the key, and this goes back to you, former Prime Minister, we have to work together. We have to work together. That was the key fundamental conclusion after the 6.5 years of Truth and Reconciliation Commission, going from harm, the massive harm that was done to children and the trauma that resulted, the healing that's necessary so that we can now have good relations. And I think if we look to the future on this trajectory, the key message now I would add is that we not only have to work together, there has to be inclusion. We have to be included. And I think you, Miles, and your former leadership have always been advocating for that, and I commend you for that. So to conclude, I think we have a great opportunity here. I would challenge us to look at this as a great opportunity to create this new space within this political uncertainty, to truly work together as the panelists. And I thank you for your sage advice to us this evening. It's just, I guess, another call I'll make. Call number 95, I'll say. Calling us again to work together. But the underlying key principle and the success will be on the level of inclusion of our peoples during this trajectory that'll move forwards and upwards. So with that, I thank you kindly. I thank you very much, and I hope I apologize if I kept you too long. Hi.
Well, thank you very much, Chief Littlechild. It's great to have you join us. We're honored by your ongoing involvement with the Victoria Forum, and we hope to see you again in person soon. Please join me in thanking Chief Littlechild, as well as this panel, for getting us started on a really fascinating discussion for the Victoria Forum. And thank you all for joining us for the 2025 Victoria Forum. We look forward to your engagement over the next 2 days. Your contributions are certainly key to enriching our discussions. And now I'd like to invite you all to connect with one another informally and enjoy the refreshments that are available thanks to the wonderful efforts of the staff here at the Songhees Wellness Center. For those of you from out of town, the buses will be returning to the Empress Hotel soon after 7. Tomorrow morning, buses will depart from the hotel at 7:30. We'll reconvene at Juvik at 8 for a light breakfast. The formal program begins at 8:30 in the Farquhar Auditorium, and we look forward to a wonderful day. So enjoy the evening and the conversations. Bonne soirée.